story time about how my boyfriend and best friend were sneaking around behind my back. So a little background information, I was 15 and in 10th grade. So my mom and dad were split up and I was pretty much allowed to do whatever I wanted because of that. So I was dating this boy named Jacob. Well, my best friend Alice literally hated him. Like low-key, every once in a while, she would try to break him and I up. And when I would call her out on it, she would just deny it. Anyway, so the one day I didn't go to school because I was super sick. So the whole day I was trying to text Jacob and Allison, but nobody was answering me. Which was extremely weird because no matter what, Allison would always text me back. So after I knew the school ended, I went to Allison's house. Nobody was answering the door, so I used the spare key. I walk in and all I hear is a very loud banging coming from her bedroom. So I walk in, I see my boyfriend and her together, and then he starts saying that she drugged him. So I went on his phone, I see a bunch of old text messages between him and her, and them exchanging pictures. And then sis wants to start giving me an attitude, so I punched her in the face, and then I left and I don't talk to either of them.
I'm alone and you hear a knock, don't answer the door. That was my grandmother's one rule when she left me the family house. I thought it was just the rantings of an old woman. I didn't know how real the rule was until the other night. The house I inherited was deep in the forest, far from bustling city noises. Silence was the unspoken language here, except sometimes you would hear the owls. But the other night when I was sitting in the living room reading a book, that's when I heard it. There was a single knock at the front door. And then I remembered my grandmother's warning. If you're home alone and you hear one knock, don't answer the door. I looked over at my grandfather clock in the corner. It was midnight. I told myself that the knock was just a figment of my imagination. It was just the house settling, or a fallen branch against the door. But then it came again, a single solitary knock. But this time it sounded closer. I was panicking. I just stood there staring at the door. The third knock was so loud that it made the door rattle. There was no more denying it. Something was at the door. Every month a parade passes through my town and we're not allowed to look at it. I've lived in Arizona the past 15 years of my life, but I used to live in a small town in the middle of nowhere. I couldn't even tell you what side of the country it's on or if it's even in the United States. The only thing I know for certain is the name of the town, Point Pine. I lived in Point Pine for the first 10 years of my life, but after my 10th birthday we moved out of the town and my parents never spoke of it again. They were trying to forget about that town and I didn't blame them. Since moving out of that town, Point Pine has not been mentioned again. Well, until now when I'm telling you about it. I want to preface this with saying that when I lived there, all of these things seemed totally normal as residents. But now looking back, it's kind of scary. One peculiar thing was the Point Pine Bakery. Whenever you went there, Mr. Terrence, the owner, already knew what you were going to order. There was a rumor spread by the kids around town that he was a magician that could read your mind. Also, whenever you paid for your baked goods, you had to tip him in clothing, usually being something that you grew out of. There was an old box up by the register filled with old baby clothes and shoes. That was one of the weird things, but it's not odd at all compared to the other things. Every year on your birthday, you had to get blood work done. To this day, I still don't know what the point of that was. Another weird rule was everyone had to be up at 8:13 a.m. There were even speakers for an alarm that would go off at 8:13 a.m. all over town, like some kind of amusement park. When those alarms went off, parents would wake their children as fast as possible as if it was like a fire or something. But certainly one of the weirdest things that happened in Point Pine was the Point Pine monthly parade. It happened every month without fail, and it was never on the same date. Each month, a student from Pine Point was chosen to be in the parade. The weird thing about this parade is that we weren't allowed to watch it go by. Not on the streets, not from the windows, and not even on television. We always knew when the parade was about to start because it always started the exact same way. You would hear a chorus of voices, like a church choir. The melody wasn't familiar to me. It sounded like it could be a nursery rhyme or something similar to that. Once you heard the first note, you had 5 minutes to get inside. Well, one year around 4th of July, me and my friend Lee decided we were going to break the rules and watch the parade. Which, now that I think about it, I'm surprised more kids didn't try to do this, because when you tell a kid not to do something, obviously they're gonna do it. But we didn't know where it was gonna be, when it was gonna start, or the path it was gonna take around town, so we had to just wait. Around the 3rd week of the month, we heard the chorus start. Me and Lee looked at each other and darted off into the trees. Everyone else near us raced to the nearest building. This year, my sister's friend Reed was chosen to work the parade. We were crouching in the bushes when we heard the chorus of voices get louder and louder, and then Lee said, "Dude, I see it." We tried to straighten up to see what he was seeing, but I was always a short kid and I couldn't see over the brush. Then Lee said, "Oh no," and covered his head and ducked down, hiding from them. I yelled to Lee, "I can't see anything." Then Lee goes, "Shh, they might see us." I froze with fear and I stopped moving until they were about to pass right in front of us. Then Lee dove to the ground. Lee screams, "Oh no," and gets in a cradle-like position. Then he covers his head with his hands. I looked at Lee and asked, "What?" "I saw her. I saw that girl," he yelled. That's when I realized he was talking about Reed. I tried to get up to see, but Lee pulled me down to the ground. Then he looked at me and he said, "You don't want to see it." I think this was the first time in all the years I've known Lee that he looked genuinely terrified. I turned my back on the parade and looked at Lee. I had enough. I asked him, "What did you see?" He looked at me and said, "Those things. They're eating her." But she doesn't even care. When Lee told me this, he started crying. At this point, part of me didn't even want to see what was going on with the parade. That's when I heard the singing get louder. They were coming towards us. I shut my eyes, but the voices continued for a few more minutes. At one point, Lee started wailing. I kept my eyes shut the entire time. After that, it continued along and made its way through town. Once we started to hear everyone get out of their hiding spaces, I leaned down to help Lee get up. But when he stood up, he kept his head down. "Lee, what's wrong?" I asked. I could hear him sniffling. So I asked him again, "Lee?" He finally responded as he lifted his head. It took my eyes. I will never forget that moment when he looked up at me with no eyes. The day after that, me and my family moved out of Storytime. I never knew what became of Lee after that day. Just minutes after we left, my parents started to act like we had never existed. And as far as I know, Lee was the only person to ever see me in that parade.
I was in class on Zoom. I wanted to go to sleep, honestly, because like when I'm tired, I go to sleep. I end up falling asleep and then class ends and everyone starts leaving the class except me because I was like in a whole other universe at this point. I was dreaming, I was flying. At this point, me and the teacher are alone in the call. This is the best part. Then the teacher starts talking to me and he's like, "Samantha, wake up. Samantha, please. Samantha, you have another class." He woke me up, but I was half awake, so I didn't really know what was going on. So I thought it was my brother waking me up, and I straight up yelled. I was like, "Shut up, you fat booger." And so then I realized, oh shit, I just called my teacher a fat booger. And now he scheduled a parent conference. I'm going on Monday, so I'm really excited.
Dad, why are your nails so sharp? I thought you were old.
What do you mean?
Since the camping trip in the woods, there are scratch marks everywhere. On the sofa, on the bed.
I'm a human, not a cat. I wouldn't do that.
Also, my stuff has been showing up with a lot of red liquid stains lately. I don't even know where they came from.
Since that camping trip, do you remember doing anything dangerous?
That night, I went deep into the forest while you were sleeping, and there was a monkey. It looked very human-like, but was covered in fur. I was so scared that I threw a lot of stones at it.
OMG. Do you remember what the monkey's eyes looked like? Tell me.
Actually, its eyes were dark red, staring right at me, which was quite scary.
Daughter, quickly check your jacket and pants pockets.
Dad, there's a lot of fur here. I don't know where it came from. What? There's a face with a wide open mouth looking at me through the window.
Go down to the basement. There's a gun on the left side. Grab it.
But Dad, I don't know how to use a gun.
Just hold it tightly. Do not let go. I've called the police for you.
But what's going on, Dad? Is it because I threw the stones?
I'll explain everything later. For now, stay silent and inform me of any situation immediately.
I think I hear the sound of 4 feet walking above. Dad, come back quickly. I'm scared.
The police will be there in 18 seconds. Just shoot.
Oh my God.
You can now check part 2 by pressing share then more.
This is why you should be careful who you believe. Once there was a girl named Danny who lived with her parents, but one day she came home and found something terrifying. She went to the kitchen to get some water, but dropped the glass and screamed in terror. On the floor, she saw the body of her mother. Then her father burst into the room. He said, "Danny, listen carefully. Your mom was trying to run away and abandon us. We got in a fight. She fell. It was an accident. I'm so sorry." Danny was in shock, but nothing could have prepared her for what her father said next. We had to get rid of the evidence ourselves. If the neighbors ask questions, just say she ran away with another man. Danny ran upstairs to her room in tears. That's when she found something strange. On her bed was a suitcase with all her clothes folded inside. On top of the suitcase was a note. It said, "Danny, I packed your things. We need to leave. Your father has gone insane." If someone ever asks you this question, always say no. Once there was a woman named Mary who worked in customer support, so she'd answer a huge number of phone calls every day. But she never expected that one seemingly harmless phone call would lead to terrifying consequences. Shortly after Mary's lunch break, she picked up a call from an angry customer who said he'd been waiting on hold for almost 45 minutes. She tried helping him, but everything she said seemed to make him angrier, until he began threatening Mary, so she hung up on him. But he didn't stop there. He continued calling until Mary finally picked up at the end of her shift. But this time, surprisingly, he apologized and asked for her name, saying, "I really want to send you a gift just to show how sorry I am. You don't even need to give me your full name, just give me your first name." Feeling like she had no other choice, Mary told him her name and went home, thinking nothing could possibly go wrong. But the next day when she came back to work, she found a bouquet of flowers on her desk. And that day when her shift ended, she brought the flowers to her car, wanting to put them in a vase. And that's when a bald, middle-aged man quickly began walking towards her. When Mary was found, she had been shot 4 times and passed away on the way to the hospital. The man was the angry customer on the phone, and he sent the flowers to identify her.
Someone was murdered in my hotel room. I was in Vegas for the Taylor Swift concert a few weeks ago. But don't worry, that's not blood, that was just the paint underneath the makeup. It was a sold out show, so all of the hotels nearby had upped their prices and basically everywhere was sold out. So last minute we find this old place on the old Las Vegas Strip, which was right next to the Zach Bagans Museum. Now, if you guys watch any of my videos, you know I'm a professional ghost hunter. And that place is super haunted. We decide to investigate and we start to set up. And then my friend Mel is like, "Is that blood on the wall?" And me and Tori are like, "There's no way there's blood on the wall right now." But there was in fact blood on the wall, and we even posted a photo on our YouTube channel. That's not even the worst part. So we do the whole investigation and we try to ask the ghost why there's blood on the wall. There was something dark there. We don't know what it was, but it was so strong it exploded our scare bear. Then we heard this loud thud and people talking outside. But every time we would look out, there was nobody there. Then we heard what sounded like a trunk slam shut and a car peeled out. We were so scared. We barely slept that night. I still can't believe a ghost told me.
I hid a camera in my son's car and what I saw horrified me. Last month, my son, 17, got in a mild car accident. I was immensely disappointed in him and I made that very clear. As punishment, I decided to put him in lockdown. The set rule was that he couldn't leave the house unless given permission and he wasn't allowed out of my sight. Anyway, while my son was asleep, I decided to install a camera in his car. One of those cool shiny ones that aren't noticeable unless you search for them. I planted it in an air vent at the top, leaving the vent cracked open. My son isn't the brightest, so he would never think to search his car. He would never suspect a camera. After watching his actions over the week, I determined he had gotten his act together and could leave the house again. 3 weeks had passed and there was no suspicious activity on the car cam, so I decided it would be okay to let him drive. I regretted that decision almost instantly. He bolted out of the house and hopped in the car to head to his girlfriend's house without even letting me know. I'm quite annoyed that he didn't ask for permission, but I'll let it slide this time since it's her birthday and all. I started to watch the car cam intensely. He had gotten to our house a few minutes ago and he left her birthday present in the car.
This is what they meant when they said, "Don't talk to strangers." In the early 1900s, a 10-year-old boy was playing in the woods when a tall man appeared and asked if he wanted to come back to his cabin for dinner. Totally caught off guard, the boy reluctantly agrees and begins walking. When they get to the cabin, the boy is relieved when he sees Paul, a family friend, sitting on the porch, so the boy happily goes inside. After they eat, the boy says thank you to the strange tall man, says bye to Paul, and then he leaves. He had only walked a few steps when he sees his family, along with Paul, running up the path towards him, frantically asking if he was okay. Confused, the boy says, "I'm just fine," and he looks at Paul and he's like, "Why didn't you tell them I was with you at the cabin?" And he points over his shoulder. Paul glances over the boy's shoulder and then narrows his eyes and says, "You were kidnapped by a cult 3 days ago. No one's seen you." Terrified, the boy turns around to look at the cabin he just came from, and it's gone. All he sees is a dark forest that stretches for miles.